Welcome back. So I'm still with John Lewis, and this is a book called John Lewis, His Life or a Life, and I'm reading a segment continuing in the book. John Lewis was born on February 21st, 1940 in Pike County, which is a rural area in Alabama. When John Lewis was born, Tobias and Betty Carter's son, Frank, John's great-grandfather, was still alive. He had been emancipated as a small boy. John was impressed by his great-grandfather's reputation for immense strength. Frank was known to plow soil and pick crops as few men could. He was also a math whiz who performed financial calculations quickly, which he did on payday to make sure he wasn't cheated. John also remembered the old man as, quote, lighter than any other black person I've ever seen, end quote, and having remarkably straight hair. John's mother, Willie Mae, never talked about her grandfather's skin tone. The subject upset her. The implication was that Frank's biological father may have been white and may have raped Betty. The silence about the subject always made John uneasy. John held more vivid memories of Frank's wife, Betty Baxter Carter, or Grandma Bessie, the matriarch of the extended Carter clan, who was the midwife at his birth. John would endear himself to Grandma Bessie on his family Sunday visit to her house by shining up a chinaberry tree to retrieve eggs from a hollow where an eccentric hen would lay them. Bessie and Frank lived near John in Pike County. So did John's grandparents, Dink and Della Carter. So too did many other aunts, uncles, and cousins. The area was called Carter's Quarters because of all the family members that lived there. Holiday gatherings sometimes included hundreds of relatives from Pike County and beyond. Although John grew up among Carters, his mother had become a Lewis. In 1931, at the age of 16, she met Eddie Lewis at the Macedonia Baptist Church. Nicknamed Buddy or Shirty, Eddie was a compact, stocky young man, 5 years her senior. His family had moved to Troy in 1904. Although in the subsequent decades the Lewises shuttled around Georgia and Alabama before returning to Pike County in 1928, Eddie's grandfather, Carrie Lewis, had been a sharecropper, and his father, Henry, had been a turpentine man, extracting pine resin from trees to make the solvent for construction projects. Eddie worked on bridges for several years before taking up farming. When she met Eddie, Willie Mae was smitten. "We just fell in love," she told her son. Married in 1932, the couple would have 10 children, Aura, a girl, then Edward, who was deaf, and then on a cold, rainy night in 1940, John Robert, whom they called Robert or Bob. 7 more children followed, with Henry Grant, the youngest, arriving in 1952. They all lived in a shotgun house, 3 rooms including the kitchen. John recalled that you could stand in one room and see almost all the way through the interior, or fire a shotgun's bullet from the front door straight through the back. All the Carter's homes were small and ramshackle. Once, when 15 of the cousins were gathered at the house of one aunt, a fierce storm blew in, dislodging the tin roof. John's aunt had the children line up, clasp hands, and follow the wind from one room to another, so that each time the whipping blast rocked the little house, the group would be there to provide ballast. "We just walked with the wind backward and forward through the house until the storm was over," Lewis recounted. By the time John was 4, Eddie had saved $700 with a loan of $100 from the Copelands. It was enough to buy his own place. The plot Eddie purchased was 100 acres set on red clay near a swamp off a dirt road, Route 5, Box 225. Quote, "It was a good deal," John reflected years later. It was an unbelievable deal, but it was no ticket to middle-class comfort. The road to the house was steep and rugged. When it rained, the cars would get stuck in the mud or slide into ditches. Years later, the country paved its roads, but only up to the point where the black-owned properties began. Sweet story, until America interjects with all this racist rudeness. By not paving the roads up further in the community, those are missed opportunities where people can quickly go to work, where it's just so many things that by not paving the roads as the government should have done. John remembered the day the Lewises moved. Excitement filled the air as they loaded up the wagon and borrowed pickup trucks, carrying everything down the road a few miles. John sat in the back seat, wedged between an old radio and his dog, Riley. His father drove. Even then, John understood that his family was graduating from being sharecroppers, a plight he would compare to slavery, to being farmers. The new house was hardly palatial, but it had 2 large front rooms, a kitchen, high ceilings, a fireplace, front and back porches, and a tin roof. Near the front porch were pecan trees and a covered well. So I'll stop here. Tell me what you think. Thanks so much for listening.